Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you very much indeed for inviting me to be with you in sunny Orlando in late May. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm very happy to be here because for the last 31 years, I've lived in New Jersey. So thank you very much indeed, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And by the way, you may think that I don't know anything about your organization. You may think that the media is totally ignorant of the supply chain people. You are wrong. I happen to know that this organization is very well run. It is highly intelligent. It is very well managed, I should say. And it has what I would say rather sharp elbows on occasion. I know this from my own personal experience, and I will describe that. Many months ago, when we were getting prepared for me to be here, someone from the organization called up my agent. Now, in television news, everybody has an agent. It's a bit like professional sports. The agents actually run the business, but that's another story entirely. And the supply chain person said to my agent, "Does Mr. Varney believe in free speech?" What kind of a question is that for a man who works for the Fox News channel, may I ask? Well, look, you pay your agent an arm and a leg to represent your interests. So we came back immediately and he said, "Of course, what are you thinking? Of course Varney believes in free speech." Whereupon the supply chain people said, in that case, "Will he give one?" You will be... You will therefore be very happy to learn that my remarks this afternoon will be unbelievably short, okay? I promise. Now, that's not a true story, okay, but nonetheless, it is true that many, many months ago, we were making plans for me to come here today. And the idea came up, well, what are you going to talk about? And now, I put it to you, how on earth can you say, 6 months away, I'm going to talk about this, this, and this? In this day and age, you simply cannot say any such thing. We live in an era, a time, when news is just cascading upon us. It's constant. It's changing all the time. This was not true 5 or 6 years ago. It's certainly been true post the panic and the recession of 2008, 2009. News is just coming right at you all the time. And the idea that you can say, well, in May, late May 2013, I'll talk about this, this, and this. You simply cannot say that. For example, every day when I get up, 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time, by the way, it's my job to establish a list of stories which are going to intrigue you. And these are the stories which I have to put on the air, on television, make you watch. I live or die by eyeballs. If you don't watch, I don't eat. I'm out of a job. It's that simple. Well, just look at the list of stories that I came up with as of very early this morning. Talk about a cascade of news. I've got 7 headlines, each of which I could do a whole show on, easily. This was not true 5 or 6 years ago, but it's certainly true today. Item number 1. A Chinese company is going to buy the world's largest producer of pork products, Smithfield Foods, which is an American company. They're going to pay $4.7 billion cash. That's not very interesting, is it? But when you think about it, it is. Are we going to accept China taking control of the world's largest pork producer, which is an American company? That's an interesting issue. And how are we going to allow China to spend its $2.2 trillion in liquid assets? Are we going to let them spend it in America? Big issue. Very good headline. Number 2, Lois Lerner. I'm sure you know that name by now. She of the IRS. She of the lady who said, "I'm not answering any of your damn questions, go away." She of the lady who takes administrative paid leave, $177,000 a year, but refuses to answer any questions. The headline this morning is, in 1996, when dear Lois was running the Federal Election Commission, she told a Republican candidate, "If you don't drop out of the race, we'll press charges." Talk about political influence. I think we at Fox could make a headline out of that. Number 3, Attorney General Eric Holder today started meeting senior news executives, trying to explain how on earth He could say to Congress, I never had anything to do with investigating that Fox News reporter, at the same time signing off on the warrant to investigate that Fox News reporter. He started talking to news executives today, but the New York Times refused to attend. The greatest Obama supporter on this planet, the New York Times, refused to attend the meeting. That's a great headline. That means here comes the resignation very soon of Attorney General Eric Holder. That's number 3. Number 4, I've got a new number for you on disability for Social Security. The new number is 10,978,040. That's how many people today in the United States of America claim disability Social Security benefits. That is an all-time high. That is up almost 4 million in 4 years. It's not the number that makes the headline, it's the issue. Is this or is this not an entitlement nation? That's a great headline, a great issue. Number 5, food stamps. Do you know that we are still signing up 3,000 people a day to take on food stamps when we're supposed to be in the process of recovery? There are now nearly, it's just 20,000 shy of 48 million Americans. Same issue. Are we or are we not an entitlement society? Terrific headline. And now the more important stuff. Japan, headline number 6. The stock market overnight down 5%. That follows a 7% drop a week ago. Japan, by the way, is printing money like you wouldn't believe. An unlimited supply of yen going out there. And they're down 12% in 2 days on the stock market. That's a headline. Last one, number 7. Reported this morning, 8:30 Eastern Time, America's economy is expanding at a rate of 2.4%. Not much of a headline, but is this the new normal? Is this what we now have to accept as normal for the American economy? After 4 years of intense government spending and stimulus, we're only at a 2.4% annual rate of growth. That's it. 7% unemployment, massive debt. Is this the new normal? All of these stories relate to you, your business, and the political climate and economic culture in which we live. Those are 7 headlines, fresh out of the box, first thing this morning. And I can make a show out of each of them. Times really have changed. You cannot say, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, I'll talk about this, this, and this. You cannot say that. So what am I going to talk about this afternoon? It's about time I got to that, I suppose. Here's my premise. Here's the premise of what I want to establish and say this afternoon. The whole world changed with the financial panic of 2008. And it was a panic. It wasn't a crash, it was a panic. We hadn't seen the like for 100 years. The whole world changed. And we are living with that world right now. That is the world created by that panic that we live in, that we work in, that we operate in. That panic changed our economy, our politics, our policy, and it changed our financial culture. So what I want to do this afternoon is not a history lesson, please, certainly not. I'm in the news business, no history, please. No, but go from the panic of '08 to where we are now, how do we get here, and where are we going from here? That's what I want to address this afternoon. But I will add one last subject at the very end. I'm going to talk to you, ladies and gentlemen, about demographics, population shift. Because it's my opinion that the demographics, we're going through an extraordinary change all over the world, which is a much greater driver of economies and people than is politics or the economy. I'll make the point. Throughout the world, fertility rates are falling. Yes, I'm going to address you this afternoon on fertility rates. You thought this was going to be a boring old lecture on economics. I know you did. But full disclosure, right up front, I am an expert on fertility rates. I mean, I wrote the book because I have 6, count them, 6 children. Astonishing, isn't it? What a performance for a cold fish Englishman. 6 children, ladies and gentlemen. I'll take your applause later. Okay, got it. Now, you're obviously wondering, what on earth is this guy doing here? He's dressed like a refugee from Wall Street. He's got an exotic foreign accent, and he's at a golf resort in Florida. What's he talking about, fertility rates? Good Lord. Here's the story, and it's profound. Throughout the world, throughout the developed world, fertility rates are falling to the point where populations in approximately 45 countries are falling. And at the same time those populations are coming down, they are aging. That means you've got an ever larger group of people who are retired, living on the health and pension benefits of those people who are still working, and that group shrinking, who in turn are having ever fewer children. This is a demographic clash which you cannot turn around in a couple of years. You can't turn it around in decades. And that demographic clash will make the headlines of the future and will shape your industry and your business in the future in ways you can't possibly imagine. There you have it. There's my premise. The panic, all the way through to today, where are we going, and demographics, fertility rates. What a lineup. Okay, let me get started. I'm going to be rash enough to suggest exactly when the panic hit. I'll tell you, it was Thursday, September the 18th, 2008, literally at lunchtime. Literally. That's when the panic hit. I'll digress for 30 seconds. There's a guy on a plane. He's coming back. He's been ordered back to the United States from his birthday party in Italy. His name is Bruce Bent. That's a name that none of you know, probably. But in fact, Bruce Bent is a legend in the financial industry because he invented the money market mutual fund. Let's not get technical, but everybody in this room has money in a money fund, whether you know it or not. It's the convenient parking lot for money. Pays interest, put it in, take it out whenever you like. Okay, you've got liquidity, safety, yield. That's the money fund. He invented these things. 1971. The first money fund was his. He's ordered back to America. Why? Because at lunchtime on Thursday, September the 18th, 2008, his money fund group, the reserve group of funds, froze with $86 billion in it. That is the moment of panic. In our society, modern society, you've got to have the instant free flow of money. It must be unhindered. It can't get clogged up anywhere. It's got to move real fast, instantaneously. And when a giant money fund freezes, you've locked it up. There's a log jam. 2 hours later, a better-known group, the Putnam Group of Funds, also froze. That's a panic, ladies and gentlemen. And we've not seen the like for 100 years. Henry Paulson, Treasury Secretary, knows a few things about running an economy. He realized it is a panic. He convened a meeting in the White House for the next day of every single political leader in the country. President, Vice President, leaders of the House, Senate, Democrats, Republicans. They're all there. And he says, I must undo this logjam. For that, I need $700 billion. I know for a fact that he got down on his knees and begged Nancy Pelosi for $700 billion. Where's the videotape when you really need it? Don't have it. He begged, he pleaded, he cajoled, and they gave it to him. They said, okay, Henry, go do it. Here's the money. They spent the next week organizing what became known as TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, $700 billion. They submitted it to the House of Representatives on Monday, the 29th of September. Horror of horrors. The House said, no, you can't have it. That set off the alarm bells. Panic all over again. The leaders thought, good Lord, we're going to get blamed for a global crash. Can't have that. So they they stuffed another $100 billion into the TARP program, made it $800+ billion, submitted it to the Senate on October the 2nd. They said yes. Submitted it to the House, strangely enough, backwards, on Friday the 3rd, and the House said yes. Relief. It's okay, boys. The cavalry's arrived. We got the money. Everything's going to be just fine. Wrong. Monday, October the 6th, crash week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 18% that week. 5 European banks went under. Iceland, a sovereign state, went bankrupt, belly up. Look, this is not a mere speck of rock in the North Atlantic. This is a member of NATO. It is the oldest democracy on the planet, and they were bankrupt. Can you imagine the symbolic effect of the bankruptcy of a sovereign state in the middle of a financial panic? The Europeans held a meeting. What are we going to do about this American problem? They always phrase it like that. It's always somebody else's fault. It's never their own socialist fault. No. It's always the Americans. So they came up with 2 trillion euros as a special emergency fund to back up their financial institutions. Note the use of the word trillion. For the first time, trillion had entered our financial vocabulary. We'd gotten used to tens of billions, then it was hundreds of billions in TARP, and now it was trillions, plural. Monday, October the 13th, a meeting was held at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Henry Paulson officiated. He shoves a piece of paper across to the 9 leading bankers of the United States. He said, "You'll sign this. You'll sign this, or you'll sign it." And they did. At that moment, $330 billion, the initial tranche of TARP, was stuffed into the American banking system. That is called liquidity. The logjam was removed. The panic was over. The Dow Jones average in the final 2 hours of trading on that Monday went up 913 points in 2 hours. End of panic. From September the 18th to October the 13th, that was the period of panic, and it ended that Monday afternoon. And that set the stage for the world that we live in, because everything changed at that, in my opinion. And maybe I'm being a bit extreme, but I think all kinds of things shifted. The earth moved when that panic was ended. Question, let me digress for a second. How did the media react to this? Not me, no, the media, the establishment media. I have no part of this, please. No, the establishment media called this the failure of capitalism. The failure of markets, the failure of American dynamic capitalism. It had failed us. We'd had a panic. It was crash city. The media blamed the American system. Free markets, they blamed that. That's what they did. And in doing so, they shifted a lot of things in our society. Just for a second, go round the block for a second. When have you ever heard the establishment media in America be really gung-ho for dynamic American capitalism? You ever seen that? How about CBS, the nightly news? How about ABC, World News Tonight? How about NBC, Nobody But Communists? I mean, do you really, how many times have you ever really seen them come on strong? Come on, boys, let's grow, let's have some profit. You ever seen that? Never. CNN? The Clinton News Network, never. Go around the country, major establishment newspapers, the Boston Globe, the Chicago Tribune, the Sacramento Bee, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Los Angeles Times, the San Diego Union, the Houston Chronicle, the Miami Herald, the Atlanta Constitutional Journal, the Washington Post, and then we have the New York Times. When, ever, have you ever seen in any of those publications a vigorous defense of the American way? Free markets, capitalism, competition, individual liberty. You ever seen that? No, you don't. You just don't see it. I am so confident of my point that I will make the following forecast. If the good Lord returned to earth one more time tomorrow and walked across the Sea of Galilee, the headline in the New York Times next day would read, "Jesus can't swim." Guaranteed, absolutely guaranteed. But I digress, do I not? So the panic's over. It's the afternoon of Monday, the 13th of October. The panic is over. Then it all starts. That's when the shift begins. 3 weeks later, there is a presidential election. And President Obama, Barack Obama, becomes the president of the United States of America. I think that panic had a lot to do with it. John McCain he suspended his campaign in the middle of the panic. He didn't seem to know what to do. He wanted to be involved, but didn't know what to do. Barack Obama appears aloof, removed from it all, kind of in charge. He's the new guy. He's got some ideas here. He's elected. That shifted our politics away from what I would describe as market-oriented capitalism as the stress towards all government all the time. Government will get us out of this. That is a profound shift, and in part it was the result from that panic. Policy immediately shifted. We had the $863 billion stimulus program, all government all the time, government spending. We had a dramatic increase in central government spending by the federal government. It went up dramatically from 20% of GDP to 24% of GDP, like that. We had a whole series of bailouts. It wasn't just Wall Street, it wasn't just the banks, it wasn't just AIG, it was General Motors, it was the housing industry. It was all kinds of industries bailed out. That is not the American way, but it became the American way. Politics shifted, policy shifted, regulation. Boy, did that shift. Immediately, we were presented with financial reform, Dodd-Frank, which is the most bureaucratic mess I've ever seen in my life. It prevents banks from functioning properly, but that's government, the hard whip hand of government. We saw it right there. Obamacare, basically you've socialized 15% of the American economy. That's a shift, in part because of the shift in our politics from the panic. The economy promptly fell to pieces. You know the story. We lost 8 million jobs. The economy sank into a severe recession. For 1 quarter, we were contracting at a 9% annual rate. And our debt went through the roof from $10.6 trillion when the president was first elected to $16.8 trillion now. That upsurge in debt began right there and then when we shifted our politics and our policy. Again, I go back to this. Were it not for that panic, I don't think you would have seen this enormous shift in our economy and our politics. But there's one other area which I think is more important that went through precisely the same kind of shift. And that, in my opinion, is our financial culture. That's the way we feel about our jobs, our industry, our money, our investment, our savings, the banks. It's the way we think about finance, our financial culture. That panic introduced a wave of anger and serious, I guess the word is anger. And it shifted the financial culture. And we in the media had something to do with that. I'll give you a couple of examples. And this is me. This is what I did. I take full responsibility for what I did. Do you remember Tyco? Tyco was the conglomerate established by Dennis Kozlowski. I won't go into the details, but essentially Dennis was a pretty good businessman, and he arranged this conglomerate. Unfortunately, he looted it. He took $300 million from it. He went to prison. He's there now. He probably won't come out. You may or may not remember Tyco, Dennis, $300 million. What you may remember is the $6,000 shower curtain. Yeah. He bought, with Tyco money, a $6,000 shower curtain. Now, what are ordinary people supposed to think about this? Didn't this encourage resentment against the rich? Look what these people are doing with our money. They're stealing it. $6,000 shower curtain? That's disgraceful. And then I got a picture of the $6,000 shower curtain. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not in radio, I'm in television. Pictures are the lifeblood of television. And when you get a picture of a $6,000 shower curtain, which was bought by a crook, then you use it. You put it up there 24/7. Look at this, boys. Just look at this. $6,000 shower curtain. You can feel, build the anger, build the anger. I've just given capitalism such a black eye. I mean, deservedly, because the guy was a crook. Okay, but look what I'd done. I put this picture on the air, and that became the symbol of the outrageous behavior of the rich, the bankers, the executives, etc., 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 etc. And then we found out that Dennis actually had held a 55th birthday party on the island of Sardinia, that's in the Mediterranean, paid for by Tyco shareholder funds. And at this birthday party, it was a revel. It was a drunken orgy. It was a bacchanal. They had waiters dressed as Romans with their togas on, and they're carting drinks around like this all over the place. And in the center of the ballroom, all paid for by Tyco shareholder funds, by the way, in the center of the ballroom, there was an ice sculpture. It was a male ice sculpture. You see where I'm going? Okay, I'll spell it out. The male ice sculpture was peeing vodka. Okay? Now, be reasonable, please. Look, I normally would say the male ice sculpture was urinating vodka, but with a British accent, you can get away with anything. So, the sculpture was peeing Stolichnaya, to be absolutely precise. And guess what? Got a picture of it. Yes, not a mere still shot, certainly not. No, moving video. Oh, you could see the flow, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, I used it up and down the wazoo. Stuart Varney used that thing. Look what I'd done. black eye for capitalism. Those filthy rich, you can feel it, can't you? You can feel the anger building, and that's what happened. It shifted our financial culture. Then I give you the case of John Thane. Maybe you know that name. John Thane was the man who led Merrill Lynch in that fateful weekend, just as the panic was getting underway, when Merrill Lynch was forcibly taken over by the Bank of America. Now, John was not happy about this forcible takeover, and so he needed some kind of compensation. So he organized a new office, a makeover of his existing office. And that new office contained a $35,000 commode. No, a commode is not a toilet. It is a piece of European cabinetry. I know that because I got a picture of it. And of course, I used it, okay? So picture a commode, $35,000, bought by John Thane, the man whose company had lost $15 billion in 12 weeks. But we got 35,000 boys for a commode. You see how it goes? You see what happened? That was a shift in our financial culture, and that helped encourage the regulation change, the policy change, the political shift. That's what happened. So that brings us up to the present. There you have it. You got the panic, the reaction, the economic fallout, the shift in our culture, the shift in our politics, all the way up to the present. And what have we got now? That's a very good question, because I think that now we've got a situation where the president is running out of steam. He's had 4 years, in my opinion, of all government all the time, and we've entered a period of what I might call the new normal, okay? And that is low growth, high unemployment, escalating debt. We seem to be at a point where that's where we are now. I want to suggest where we are going in the future. I think I'm actually very, very positive for 2 reasons. I think the new normal is going to come to an end. The first reason is there will be a shift back in politics in the elections of 2014 and 2016. I think we will get away from, somehow or other, we will get away from all government all the time. Tax more, don't cut spending, ignore the debt. We will get away from that. I think the Democrats, and of course President Obama is not standing again, but I think the Democrats will suffer significant losses. They may lose the Senate in 2014. They will not win control of the House. There's another element to throw in here, and that's Obamacare. Here it comes. October the 1st, the exchanges are supposed to be operating. January the 1st, full-scale Obamacare. This is chaos. This is a mess. This is the Obama signature on legislation. In that kind of environment, with this mess developing, I don't see how the Democrats can do that well in 2014. So, my conclusion is that there is a political shift coming next year and in 2016. Second reason, and this I think is perhaps just as important, we're going through an energy revolution in America, and nothing can stop it. The politicians in California and New York might want to stop fracking. They may want to stop us getting at natural gas and shale oil underneath those territories. They may try to stop it, but you can't roll back this energy revolution which we are in. America is sitting on top of gigantic oil and natural gas reserves, and I mean gigantic. I have property in New York State. Underneath my property is the Marcellus Shale deposit. In that deposit, which stretches from Pennsylvania all the way through upstate New York, there are quadrillions of cubic feet of natural gas. A quadrillion is 1,000 trillion. That's a huge supply. Do you mean to tell me that we will forever say, the environmentalists are right, we will never get at that natural gas? We'll never do it. Rubbish. Of course we'll get at it. In California, in one deposit, the Monterey Shale deposit, there are 15 billion barrels of oil, valued at over $1 trillion. Do you think that Governor Jerry Brown and the environmentalists will be able to say, no, yeah, you can't have it. We're bankrupt, doesn't matter, you can't have that natural resource. Not going to do it. That's nonsense. We're going to go get it. And when we go get it, the politicians can't stop it. The energy revolution rolls on, and there will be significant growth in jobs, the economy. I think manufacturing starts to come back to America because we got cheap energy. And I think those two things are going to happen. Political shift, energy revolution. I see periods of extraordinary growth within 3 years for this economy. And I'm talking about 4, 5, 6% growth. I think you'll see it. Beware, however, of something called the control of language, because that's very common in our society. Controlling what language, how you describe a given issue. And bearing that in mind, I want to give you the story of Chesley Schulenberger. Talk about control of the language. Chesley Schulenberger, you may have forgotten now, but approximately 3.5 years ago, he was the pilot of that jet that took off from LaGuardia Airport in New York. The jet flew into a flock of geese. Geese were sucked into every one of his engines, and he completely lost all engine power, and it was a fully loaded jet that was flying over Manhattan. Heavily crowded Manhattan or the Bronx or Brooklyn, heavily crowded. He had no engine power. So what did he do? He glided this jetliner across the northern tip of Manhattan, and he brought it down onto the Hudson River in February. And he brought it down, landed it. Everybody got off. He was the last person off. He just glided that plane to a safe landing. Nobody was injured. He was rightly claimed to be and given the name Glider Hero. That's the way we use the language to describe Chesley Schulenberger. He was feted by Congress. He appeared at a joint session of Congress, congratulated by President Obama himself. He was a stand-up hero, the Glider Hero. Unfortunately, at that point, it was discovered that he was a Republican. And overnight, talk about control of language, he was no longer the Glider Hero, he became the bird killer. Just like that. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the control of language. Be very careful. Which brings me to the last point that I want to make. And this is something that you may have heard rumblings about, but it's not really hit the headlines yet, even though it really, really should. And that's where I start to talk about fertility rates. Here's my point, and I'll keep this real brief. Throughout the developed world, fertility rates are falling very, very sharply, to the point where approximately 45 countries are losing population. That means it's not that their rate of population increase is stabilizing. No. They are losing population. Populations are declining. Now, in fertility studies, there is a magic number, and the magic number is 2.1. If you have a fertility rate of 2.1, your population is dead stable. Doesn't go up, doesn't go down. Consider this. In Italy, Greece, and Russia, the fertility rate is 1.2. In Germany, Spain, Japan, the fertility rate is 1.3. Those are very significant countries and competitors of ours. 1.3. In all of Europe, every single European country, the fertility rate is 1.9 or less. It's 1.3 in Scandinavia and the old Iron Curtain countries. Overall, it's 1.9 or less. In other words, nowhere in Europe has replacement level fertility. Nowhere, not a single country in Europe is replacing its population. How about Asia, East Asia? South Korea, 1.6. North Korea, I haven't a clue. Taiwan, unfortunately, that's not funny. Taiwan, 1.5. Singapore, 1.1. And where do you think is the population decline epicenter? I'll tell you. It is the middle-class communities of Beijing, Shanghai, Guangdong, and all of Hong Kong, where the fertility rate is 0.9. This means population decline in societies that are developed throughout the world. Huge headlines in Germany recently when they did the calculation. The population of Germany today is 82 million. By the year 2035, it will be 60 million. That's not that far away. I ask you, when in human history Have you ever seen a society lose approximately a quarter of its population in one generation? Yes, of course you have. Civil war, pestilence, famine, natural disaster. Of course it's happened before. But you have never, ever seen any society voluntarily, without any coercion, reduce the number of babies that are born in that society. You have never seen that before, and it's happening now. Can you imagine what a society looks like when you lose a quarter of your population in one generation? How about Japan? Japan, they are losing population big time. And every year on the, actually, I'm digressing a second. I'll give you the example of Japan. They have the most extreme demographics of any society in recorded human history. No society has ever looked like this one. They've got far more old people and far fewer babies than any society in recorded human history. Last month, we announced on my program that the sale of adult diapers in Japan now exceeds the sale of baby diapers in Japan. That's an extraordinary thing to say. Every year, on the emperor's birthday in Japan, he hands out a little silver sake cup to every single citizen who in the previous year has turned 100. Okay? This past year, he handed out 20,000. 20,000 of his citizens had reached the age of 100 in 1 year. But because Japan is totally broke, flat broke, the most indebted nation in the world, by the way, they couldn't afford the silver. They handed out aluminum sake cups. How about that? And then we have the example of Russia. At the end of communism, the population of Russia, Soviet Union actually, was 149 million people. Today, it's 139 million people. They have lost 10 million souls. Okay? And by the way, Russia is the only predominantly Caucasian society where longevity rates are falling. The life expectancy of a Russian male is 58. Okay? That's lower than Bangladesh. Such are the ravages of vodka. Okay. Now, what does this mean? It means that societies are losing population. They're losing. Populations are declining. That's not gone into our heads yet, but they are declining. And at the same time, they're aging. We're living a whole lot longer. A lot longer. Life expectancy in Japan, 82 for a woman, 80 for a man. America, 79 for a woman, 77 for a man. Think about this. When Social Security appeared in the mid-1930s, if you'd reached the age of 65, your life expectancy was 14 months. Today, if you reach the age of 65, your life expectancy is 14 years. That gives you some idea of the pressure on pension and health payments to retired people provided by an ever-shrinking group of people who are working, who are having ever fewer children. That's a demographic generational clash. It has not hit the headlines yet, but it will. Why do you think Illinois is in such dire shape? Because they've made enormous promises to their retired government workers which they cannot fulfill. California, same story. Rhode Island, exactly the same story. We've made promises to elderly people that we cannot fulfill because of the demographic shift. One last statistic before I finally close this thing. In Italy, in the year 2020, that's what, about 6 years away, 6.5 years, that's it. In Italy, in the year 2020, for every 100 adults, 55 of them will be over 65. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a society in which way more than half are past retirement age? That is extraordinary. Italy will look like a giant Fort Lauderdale. It's not the villagers. No. This is the retirement country, ladies and gentlemen. That's extraordinary. And by the way, in Japan, it's 53 out of every 100 are 65 and older. In Germany, it's 52. In France, it's 51. And what do you think is the number in the United States of America? In the year 2020, how many adults will be 65 or older? What's the magic number here? Any ideas? Any guesses? Okay, I'll tell you. 29. Yes, we are a youthful, young, dynamic society, are we not? That's who we are. I wish we could get back to that. Now, why is it only 29? I'll tell you. Because America is full of immigrants. Actually, immigrants. Eager young baby makers flooding north of the border who really are shifting our demographics, ladies and gentlemen. So there you have it. All right, that's my demographic gig. It's now time for me to close. Now, you know how the speaking business is. Everybody has a closer. You can't just come to an end suddenly, period, full stop. You can't do that. You've got to round it out nicely. Send them on their way. That's how you do it, right? So most speakers, good public speakers, they have a closing story. It's usually personal. It's usually quite long drawn out. So you draw the audience into your narrative. You build them up, you hit them with a punchline. That's your closer. They clap, they cheer, they shout, they stamp their little feet, and you are an accomplished public speaker, okay? Well, I'm going to do something a little different. Here's my closer. I am going to demand from you right now, when I cue it, a rousing round of applause. Wait, I will cue it, okay? I want this applause to be loud, vigorous. You don't have to stand up. It doesn't have to be a standing ovation, certainly not. No, but I want it to be thunderous applause. I want it to be sustained. I want it to last for minutes on end. Here's the closer. I deserve that applause because it's people like me who come to this country and have count them, 6 children. Oh, wait, who will keep you in your old age pension benefits. I want to hear it now. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. I believe I've got a little time. We've got microphones.
Yes, we have microphones. And I agree. I think that we would have some questions would be wonderful. I know we kind of wrapped the other one up abruptly, and my apologies for that, because I thought we had such a fabulous lineup of speakers. They did a phenomenal job on leadership. So we definitely don't want to shortchange the questions. So please ask away.
Any questions of any kind? And
Right
believe
over
me,
here.
I've been asked all kinds of questions. Yes, sir.
Don Clark from Rutgers Business School.
Sure.
Let's just suppose that President Obama rung you up and said, I'd like to have a one-on-one conversation to get some advice for the rest of my remaining term. What advice would you give him?
Resign. No. No. I would say take a long, hard look at what you've done economically and change course. I think he's changed America significantly, really significantly, and I think it will have a lasting impression. Now it's time to change course and liberate the private sector. Enough with the government. Liberate the private sector. Pull back on some of this regulation. Let's have tax reform. Lower tax rates for corporations, lower tax rates for individuals, far fewer deductions. Make it a much simpler, reformed tax code. All I want to do, all I would suggest that he should do, is reinvigorate the American machine. The American machine has no equal. You set this country loose. You set private enterprise loose in the United States of America, and by goodness me, you unleash a giant. Vigor, dynamism, profit. Go get them. Don't you love that? Isn't that the American way? Isn't that what we really want to do? Next question. Well?
Questions? Comments?
Yeah, comments. Go ahead. Have a go at me. I don't mind. I don't mind. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in the absence of comment, statement, or questions, I do want to thank you. I've mingled amongst you throughout this day, and I've met some extraordinary people. It's great to be among people who are clearly at the top of their game, who are real movers and shakers in society, and it's a pleasure to be with you. I want to thank you very much indeed, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.